Hi, well, welcome everybody. So we are here at our Acquisition Workforce Subcommittee meeting from the FAC. So looking forward to a great discussion today. Friday afternoon, an unusual time for us, but hey, we are here ready to roll. I have the honor of introducing our chair and co-chairs, Nicole and Ann. We're going to be leading our conversations this afternoon with our GSA colleagues. So looking forward to all of that. And I see as our members are rolling in, we'll take a roll call a bit later. But in the interest of time, I want to pass it to Nicole and get us going.
Yeah, sure. I'm super excited to be here with you all. Really pleased about the conversation that's ahead of us. We're continuing the discussion about education and credentialing. This all relates to onboarding the next generation of acquisition workforce individuals who are going to be tasked with thinking about sustainability in federal acquisition, and then thinking about how do you ramp up and create sustainability credentials. So Bea Dukes is here to talk with us about her program that's loosely called Sustainability 101, or maybe that's what we've been calling it internally. We'll get a more formal take on her about that. And then Jennifer Hino, who's going to be talking with us a bit about the sustainability credential and what that looks like. I want to thank the subcommittee for joining us for this meeting. And then I want to pass the baton to Ann and ask her to add anything that she'd like related to creating the broad scope for our conversation today.
No, just thank you both very much. And I appreciate it's a Friday afternoon. And I'm also just excited to see a lot of great work already underway and some of the early recommendations kind of moving forward. So thank you so much and look forward to helping shape things moving forward.
Great.
Let's just jump right in.
I agree. Did you want to do the roll call now, Boris, or did you want to do it later?
Actually, let's go ahead and do it now so that we've got some folks, and we'll keep track as people are joining in. So kind of fairly informal. I'm gonna just look at the screen and call out the name. So I see you, Nicole, Ann, and I see David. I see Kristen.
Hello.
I see Clyde.
Hello.
I see Mark from New Mexico.
I'm here.
All righty, so let's get it started. Back to you, Nicole.
Great. So I think as the agenda was sorted out, we were going to focus on the Sustainable Procurement 101 with you, Bea Dukes, and then move on to Jennifer. And Bea, I'm hoping you can just level set us a little bit about what this program is and what does it look like, what's it designed to do?
Thank you so much, Nicole. I want to just, I love the term Sustainability 101. I think that's kind of morphed somewhere in the atmosphere, and that's great. I just want to say that as the agency's acquisition career manager, I work across the agency with the services and with the staff offices to develop programs and initiatives for the acquisition workforce. I want to level set first, and when oftentimes people will talk about the acquisition workforce, and the first thing that comes to mind are the GS 1102s. But in GSA, it's much larger than that. And so when I talk about when Jennifer and I, because Jennifer's going to go more in the detail of what the credential is going to look like, she's our credential program manager, we're talking about how do we build this sustainability competence in GSA across all disciplines of the acquisition workforce. And that's not just 1102s, the contracting officers, the contract specialists, but the cores, the program and project managers, as well as, guess what, those who supervise those great acquisition professionals. How are we going to do that? Now, you all know that we have about 5 generations in the workplace today. So as acquisition professionals, those 5 generations didn't just start yesterday. Most of them have present right now with the credentials that they've received, probably in maybe some even in the late 1900s, the early 2000s, and they have all the different levels, and they're great and wonderful. What we have an opportunity now to do is to infuse competency development in the space of sustainability. And how can we do that? And how can we infuse competency development without the term of upskilling, right? Because sometimes that brings some negative connotivity. So we're in a place right now, we have an opportunity to get it right. We have an opportunity to level set and do something we've never done before. And that is through the new credential framework. Now we have the ability now with the new FAIC side, we are assigning acquisition training in sustainability areas. I mentioned before that we're already doing, I call it some very targeted sustainability training in terms of the total cost of ownership of green buildings and different kinds of those other initiatives that are more service specific to the kind of work that the Public Building Service does. But what does it look like to build that overall awareness among the entire community? How do we get there? Jen's going to talk about that. One thing I kind of want to leave on the table here today, though, before I hand to Jen is, and I don't want to go into the micro of what courses we have and what each one does. That's not what we're here for. It's more holistic in my mind of we need training, but we need that hands-on practitioner simulation so that we can awaken that mental thought process of, yes, I now am going to begin a new procurement with this team, that team. And what does that mean? What does that total cost of ownership look like? Well, now in fleet, we know how to acquire, sustain, and dispose of those federal assets. We have a plan program for that. But what does that mean for all the other kinds of goods and services that we procure? Not just for GSA, but for our client agencies. How do we get our workforce to start having those conversations in the morning with their coffee when we start the process of planning and not the process of submitting a requisition? Not the transactional, but that transformational discussion. And that's where my heart sits. Those are the things that keep you up at night in terms of many of these new disciplines. How do we stimulate that thought process? Not, I don't like to use it with consequences, but how do we inspire and motivate and transform the existing workforce to get to that place? How do we measure to know when we're going to get there? How do we know where we are right now? That's something I'd love to hear about and hear what others are doing, not in this forum, but a different forum. But more importantly, we're going to level set with the new folks because we have a plan. And they're coming in the door and they're going to walk in the door and they're going to hear about sustainability. More importantly, many of them are of equal importance. Many of them are of the generation. Sustainability is very important to me, and I'm not brand new, but I have to tell you that with my daughter's generation, the sustainability is very important to her and to her peers. And so they're walking in the door asking us these questions. Mm-hmm. And so with that, I really want to spend a heavy focus on what we're doing in the credential space. We don't have all the answers. This is not a recipe for how to create that brand new sustainability expert, but we're starting somewhere. And we really love this conversation. And I'm energized about it. I mean, I want to see others catch that energy, you know, and how can we become the change ambassadors to promulgate this competency development, not just in green buildings where we're pretty deep right now, we're going deep, and not just in new real property construction, right? And not just in acquiring of property for, you know, certain purposes, but for the other goods and services. So I'm not going to go any further right now. I'll come back. Jen and I can tag in this, but I want to relinquish the time right now. I'll take certainly questions, but I want Jen to come in and infuse into this discussion what she and her team have already drafted and have for us to look at and to talk about.
I think that's great. I have one question before we get there. Mm-hmm. To help bring the committee together with respect to how you two fit together in the initiatives that you're moving forward? Do you have two parallel initiatives moving forward? Are you conceptualizing this as one big thing? Can you give us a sense of what this picture looks like?
Sure. So so in terms of in terms of, I call it framework or structure, mine is overarching. Jen is working with a sustainable program for the new folks, which is part of I call it new folks, the GSA credential for 1102. She'll talk about that. That's infused in that, but she's also working on sustainability credential initial. Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the initial breadcrumbs, if you will. Is that right, Jen? The initial breadcrumbs of what a sustainability credential would look like for everyone. And so in terms of our operational space, we both report within the Office of the Senior Procurement Executive, Mr. Jeff Kosis, that you well know. And so our paths are intertwined. We do our best to stay. In fact, this morning, I was just speaking with Jen's team, her director, about some questions I had about the 1102 credentials. So we work hand in hand, and we work I would say, in parallel with each other, if that makes sense. I do most of the work government-wide and bring those influences into the agency. Jen faces more within the agency and does work internal facing. My role is internal and external.
Go ahead, Anne.
So B, are you creating sustainability programs outside of the certification? I think you referenced the climate, total cost of ownership within the green buildings. I don't know if that's something new or that's been around for a while. And then are there other programs that are running parallel to the certification?
There are. In fact, the ones I just mentioned a minute ago, I leverage those. I don't own those programs, but I mentioned I leverage those, and I leverage those through the services. And you know how OGP leveraged through FAST PBS. Those have been around. Those have been around. And they're, every time I get their slide deck, I look at them like, oh, I want to go back to that training. When was that? Right. So I can tell you that FAST and PBS there are some, I don't want to say dual tracks, but I want to say some separate tracks where they're honing in on targeted training. And that's where I meant to the green building kind of thing. And they do that training internally for the agency's workforce. And that's why I mentioned they also do it for government-wide as well. And if you recall the case training, the training that FAST offers through the customer, the name changes all the time, but it's the customer service group. It's the QC. Yes. That group. That's the training that I'm referring to when I say the customer facing training that's offered. And they partner with PBS to do the green building training. Now that's separate from what I mentioned last month or so, the FAC 038, which is the new sustainable acquisition training class. That's an online course that's in the new system in FAI. Yeah. But the experts from those offices were heavily involved in the development of that course. It wasn't people like me who were non-sustainability experts. I'm a workforce expert. I wouldn't say I'm an expert.
You're an expert.
But I'm the workforce champion of all programs, but we had people who, what I call a real SMEs in the space to do that training.
You want to ask one follow-up, and it's going to tie into our discussion around credentialing. It's really interesting. So I think what I remember from the old days and what you're saying is there are sustainability training and development efforts within some of the high impact functions within GSA. As I recall, like buildings is all over sustainability, climate, and it's very specialized.
Yes, very.
The vehicle team has leaned into this area recently with the mandate to move towards electric. And then I think acquisitions around FAS around products has always had expertise and training in that space.
That's correct.
Are those sort of the three main kind of focus areas for GSA within sort of almost sub expertise under GSA for sustainability?
I would say yes, because as you mentioned, the fleet, the vehicle, you know, the vehicles,
fleet, buildings,
buildings, and it kind of goes by
and
category.
products.
Yeah, it goes, it aligns with the categories as well. Mhm.
Yeah, right. And
Mhm.
then I think energy probably falls within buildings.
Energy falls within
utilities.
buildings, and we partner
Yeah.
with DOE, with Department of Energy, through
Yeah.
the federal, it's the FEMP, you know, that through that and through their that program. And in fact, we've had quite a few collaboration sessions, and we talked before this group, before we even knew that we had a FAC, we were talking about how to create a partnership between GSA and DOE to stand up something. And that was even before the term credential was born as we know it today. The
That's
Federal
really
Energy
helpful.
Management Partners. That's it. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah,
Well,
and I
thank
used to
you.
run those contracts, you know, those contracts that DOE has, the sustainability contracts over the ESPCs, you know, that's another discipline, so to speak.
Mhm.
Where's
I
he
have-
been wanting to jump in?
I had a couple of words of clarification for our members. 1102, it means these are the contracting officers, contract specialists. These are the buyers, just for clarification. FAI is the Federal Acquisition Institute, which is also under Jeff Koses. There's another Jeff Birch, who's under Jeff Koses.
Just to confuse things.
Just for clarification. So 1102 is the rank and file contracting officers, contract specialists. Okay. Back to you, Nicole.
Yeah, no, so that's super helpful, but we're trying to figure out how these pieces fit together. There's no real obvious roadmap about it. And when we spoke with you the last time, B, and I apologize if we're using the incorrect words, the Sustainability 101.
It's okay.
It sounded like the initiatives that you were advancing were really looking at a higher level that was going to cut across multiple dimensions. And so it necessarily functioned in a different way. And you've offered some texture about this. So it's connecting with FAS and PBS,
Mhm.
and FAI, and
Right.
with a focus on fleet, buildings, and products, right? And
Right.
I don't know what an ESPC is. I'm going to have to ask
Oh,
you.
energy saving performance contract. Sorry for the acronym. I'll have to spell those out. I beg your pardon.
I'm learning. It's been like drinking from a fire hydrant when it comes
An
to
acronym Kool-Aid.
contracts. Yes. All right. Well, I mean, we do have certain questions about how, like, what is involved at this high level training, but I'm really happy to pass this over to Jen, and you can talk a little bit about what this credential looks like, and then we can begin opening this up.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks, B.
Jen, you're still on mute.
Thank you. You can hear me, right?
We can.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think the best way to get a sense of what a credential is, what a federal credential is to look at the former way that we used to do training. Before this modernization that happened recently, about a year ago. The idea was that folks would take training and it would be front loaded, as in all the training that they would require to obtain a warrant, for example, would be like close to 400 hours, maybe more, that they would take at the beginning of their career. Well, this changes that. This modernization changes that. Now it's, let me say, 150 to 200 hours that they front load at the beginning, and this is the fundamentals. So think of it as like foundational training that they receive. And then the credentials build on top of that. So now there's an idea of lifelong learning. So you get that foundational piece at the beginning, but you're not front loading everything. You're getting it spread out throughout your career. And it works well for things like career pivots. So if you're working in a particular area, you can take a credential to learn a different discipline within contracting, project management, and contract office representative. So I say that to say that it's good timing. This is good timing to build a sustainability credential because it's new. This whole concept of credentials is new. So FAI is managing, Federal Acquisition Institute is managing all of the credentials for the civilian workforce. They're using a lot of the ones that were built by DAU because Department of Defense was ahead of us on this. They put this into action about a little over 2 years ago. And this is new for us that we're rolling it out right now. There are about 40 credentials that are available currently to the civilian workforce. Most of those were built by DAU. So
Can you remind us a few of those, like in examples?
yeah, so there's one for construction, there's one for AE services, there's one for small business. There's a discipline where you learn all about the small business program. There's one for I don't know, B, can you think of some other ones? There's lots of ones, like I say, that are built. There are about 37 of them that are built by DAU.
Mm-hmm.
2 currently by FAI, one of them being a leadership. FAI built a leadership credential. So, you know, it's just, like I say, it's really good timing because as people are grasping the whole concept of a credential and how they build on their career, the knowledge and skills that they have to become more well-rounded. So yeah.
So how do they determine what the next credential is going to be? Because you've provided us with this mini business case. It seems like there's some level of convincing that needs to take place. Could you help us, let us know what that looks like?
There is. So there's a governance board that FAI manages. And so there are representatives from all the federal agencies. And so just like you said, you know, there's a this sort of like a vetting process where an agency has an idea for a credential. They put a business case together and they present it to the governance board. So the credential that we're building currently, the sustainability credential that we're just, this is like beginning stages of this. We plan to present it to the governance board, the FAI governance board, credential governance board, on March 14th. So it's coming up in a couple weeks that we're going to present that. And the board, you know, as you can imagine, they read the business case, they consider, is it a good use of resources? And they vote. They vote on it. I think we have a very good case. What I'll say is the recommendations that you wrote, like it was a cut paste situation, you know, that in the business case, I used a lot of the language that you had in the recommendations. So it builds a great case for a government-wide credential.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to pause and call out the rest of the committee. Good job, y'all. Like we're doing stuff that matters. We're doing stuff that is creating change. This is why we invest the time that we do to develop those recommendations. People are paying attention. This is really exciting and very affirming. So I just want to take a moment and thank the subcommittee for the work that we're doing. Jennifer, this is terrific news to hear that it's moving forward. I'm curious, as you think about this, what are the specific knowledge and skills that you're really hoping to tackle with this credential?
Yeah, so we used various websites to gather subtopics of sustainability. And the list that we came up with was sustainable acquisitions and buildings, electric vehicles, clean energy, water conservation, pollution prevention, and electronics stewardship. So that's what we gleaned from, like I say, it was various websites that we looked at all of the subtopics of sustainability. So actually, that's one of the questions I have for you guys. Do you think that that captures everything, or is there something that in a blind spot we're missing?
Anne, you're ready.
I guess I was making a distinction between kind of the phrase knowledge and skills. I was thinking about it a little differently rather than areas of expertise. I was thinking about knowledge and skills, things like the ability to develop a life cycle sustainability analysis, the ability to select suppliers that have certain characteristics that you're seeking, the ability to develop requirements that will bring forth the suppliers that you need. And so I was thinking about skills as that sort of that criteria. And then it's such a complex question around, but are there subspecialties within the credential? Like, what I was struggling a little bit with was, if a program manager volunteers within the vehicle team, they don't need to know about how to build a building that adapts to the climate. And it's, and so it's almost like what you listed here. These are the high impact areas in sustainability. And in GSA, I think it's buildings, fleet, and products. And kind of the question is, I wonder if you think about credentialing the same way you're thinking about the new modern training, where you build foundational capabilities that, regardless of whether you're a specialist in the fleet or buildings or products, there's some foundational capabilities of how to develop a sustainable plan. Whatever your expertise is, this resonates with you, because there's 5 or 6 basic skills across the acquisition lifecycle you develop. And then you become more specialized, then you can go deeper into specifically vehicles or buildings or whatever the high impact areas are that we land on.
I had the same question, Anne. I was looking at this list as application areas, but there are certain skills that are going to apply across every one of these application areas. So why don't you offer a little bit more texture, Jen, and how you're thinking about the way in which this gets structured?
Yeah, so next week we have a meeting with managers. So there are 3 managers that we plan to recruit subject matter experts from. One is the energy. She manages, her name's Jennifer Smith. She manages, she works in facilities, and she manages everything energy conservation.
Wow.
So I think the measures that she is going to share with us, the measures that the key performance indicators that they have been tracking, I think that that's going to inform us a lot of the skills and the knowledge that folks need to have, because what gets measured gets done. That's the idea. So the things that we're managing, if there's something that has been made important enough to measure it, that is something that we need to pay attention to, and folks need to learn. They need to gain skills in that regard. So it's energy, climate and sustainability is a different area, and it's also within facilities, but a different area, and fleet acquisition. So buying cars, buying electric vehicles. That's we're going to have a program management office that loans us SME in that area as well. So I think I think of the measures, I think of the key performance indicators as a way to guide the curriculum a little bit. It's at least going to give us ideas on the special areas that people need to level up, skills that they need to level up on.
And so maybe the answer to my question was embedded in what you said, and I'm just not catching it to the extent that I should. Are you thinking about critical skills that cut across all of these areas here? Or are you thinking of them as very specialized areas that individuals would learn about the deep dive specifics related to each one of these things?
I think of it as cross-cutting. I think that someone who becomes a sustainability expert, they work toward this credential and they know enough about every area, so that the conversations that they have in their particular work area is informed.
Yeah. I wonder if there are 5 elements across every one of these 7 areas that anyone who does acquisition would need to be aware of, right? Like what can be brought up to a really high level, and regardless of what the application is, you just need to hit this hard. And then you can do a deeper dive into some of the specifics that are there. I think that's what Anne was asking about at the onset. You know, has that conversation been evoked? Is there an opportunity for that conversation? Because I sort of think of that as the 1-2 punch in the curriculum delivery, to really make this stick. Horizontal skills, I guess, is as opposed to vertical skills, right?
Yeah. Yep. I like that. I like, I mean, in one way, you know, you can say if someone is working in buildings, why do they need to know a whole lot about fleet management and the goals in fleet management? But even those folks buy cars.
Right.
You
I
know?
agree 100%.
Right.
100%.
And it's about that well-roundedness I talked about. You know, it's about being more agile in the work that we do.
And I think that if you can figure out a way to focus on some of those high-level skills, you can then create the convincing story about how it applies to any sort of acquisition within GSA. Right? People also move around, right? You can't assume that what you're doing today is going to be the application area that you're going to be doing tomorrow. And why don't you go ahead and talk about what you popped into the chat?
Yeah, I think I pulled this from some work being done internationally around building sustainability into organizations. But this was the acquisition piece to it. And I liked that these are kind of skills that everyone needs, regardless of whether you're specializing in vehicle fleet or climate risk within infrastructure or building teams. And so this isn't exactly right. This may be completely wrong, but it's just kind of the direction I'm heading of like developing some fundamental skills around almost like being a generalist within the sourcing, within sustainability and acquisitions and sourcing. And then you can apply it to your specialty, your specialized area.
Kristen, you popped something in the chat. Why don't you go ahead and talk about what you have here?
Yeah, so I was thinking about it in terms of some other experiences I've had. So for example, when I worked at the Postal Service and we were driving operational excellence and lean into the organization, if you would have to do a level of project, and let's consider that a procurement, to receive credit as a belt. But there had to be somebody that could assess that project from a financial standpoint. And they needed certain credentials, competencies to be able to do that from a lean perspective. And then there's like general, like white belt that everybody in the organization needed to understand about lean, or in this case, you could replace sustainability, that fundamental knowledge that is good for anybody. But then if you're going to be a procurement specialist, there's certain credentials that we would call of these elements that in order for you to carry your weight in this endeavor, these are the key things that you should get your credentialing in. I think Ann has one there, but we had discussions around how to assess a climate risk mitigation plan. Who's going to do that in the organization, and can you build a credential around that so those people can be tapped into? So just kind of putting it in. Just recently at GDIT, we're driving new technologies, but they just put out credentialing or badging that everyone in the organization should take these 15-minute trainings to be at least versed in what these technologies are. And then if you did them all, you got a badge, a digital accelerator badge training. But if I was a solution architect, I would be expected to be trained deeper in a more narrow field, like maybe one of those areas of technology. So I think what we're trying to get at is what are those things from an acquisition workforce viewpoint would be those critical credentials or competencies for them to carry their weight and help advance the ball.
Yeah, and the more action oriented, the better. The more scenario based the training, the better, right?
I think so. And also, these are things they're going to be asked to do in their job, right? That they want to have that skill and competency in to be able to do their job more effectively. I think we heard that from a lot of our focus groups too. That key element. Yeah, I want to learn about it generally, but I also want those key nuggets that are going to help me be the professional in my role and evolve as the world changes and requirements change.
I wonder, we haven't talked about this yet, but have you thought in the credentialing about the different stages of the acquisition life cycle more generally? How that gets built into the credential itself? Different people function in different places, and maybe it's given the individuals who are receiving the credential, you don't have to worry about the whole acquisition life cycle. But can you just speak to that a little bit, to what extent it's been considered here?
So we're not that far along yet. Actually, the conversation that I'll have with those PMO managers next week, I think are going to inform that question a lot. That's something I'll get back to you on, but that is something that I'm very interested in setting it up. And also, and B alluded to this a little too, is that, it's not just the contracting officers, it's the project managers and the CORs, it's the entire integrated project team that we want this curriculum to be geared toward everyone.
Perfect.
Yeah. But I think on that note, but some of the individual credentials could be more applicable to whether you're a program manager or you're the procurement specialist. But they all have a common thread around sustainability that you're trying to build this greater government competency around.
Yes.
But before we move on from just the content of this, I'd like to ask you, Jen, what would be most helpful at this stage of the process for our subcommittee to engage with when we're talking about content, high-level skills, the acquisition life cycle, et cetera. What sort of feedback would be most beneficial at this stage?
So I think if you guys can think of a contracting officer, a project manager, what skills do you think that they should have to be a sustainability expert? Or at least what skills would they gain in this credential that you think is very important?
Sorry, I'm just taking notes here. I mean, I'd like to get some feedback from the subcommittee. It's certainly something that we could brainstorm on in our Google Doc. We all come from very different backgrounds, so you have to recognize we're not all stepping into this as sustainability educators. And although that is me, I don't teach sustainable procurement curriculum. So we're coming at this from very different spaces.
Mm-hmm. I understand, and in fact, I'm going to ask the same question of those program managers. You know, what in your mind, what is it that someone needs to know how to do?
I think we are probably going to be more adept at engaging in this conversation around the higher level of what some of those really important high level skills are. But I'd like the subcommittee to jump in right now and offer some feedback.
Well, I think when I think about it, I think definitely from the program management side, those general knowledge credentials would absolutely apply. And then what would you stack on top of that? Might be around sustainability considerations up front in program design, in problem solution, program managers are putting together, I need a solution or to procure something to help me do X, like that sustainability up front, kind of like a cybersecurity up front. You're thinking about that, your data up front versus after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe one more around understanding of the requirements that are going to be evaluated so they can kind of walk a little mile in the other person's shoes.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that, so I'd also like to get a sense, Jen, if these were built into our recommendations that move forward, is that too late for the conversation? So I'm trying to get a sense of the timing here. In as much as we're scheduled to give recommendations in May as a subcommittee. I know that you have some milestones between here and there that build the business case. Now, the business case seems to me that it may be bigger than getting into the nitty-gritty of what the contents are. So maybe we're fine, but I'd like to hear from you about the timing on this.
May would be great, actually. That would be fine.
All right, so with
the building of the credential is probably going to take about a year.
Yeah. And I think you have a really good model to follow with respect to the IT credential and how it was built out and how they looked at the different contents, how they curated the content for this. That's definitely, I think, a nice starting point. But as a subcommittee, I think we're in a nice place to be able to talk about this at a high level. And we'll reserve some time to really roll up our sleeves and Jamboard some of this. I'd like to move forward and talk about some of the other items that were on your list, because it was bigger than just the content itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you were asking questions about performance learning objectives that should be included in the credential. And upon completion, what should learners be able to do? And I think this really connects back to what we've been discussing here. Like, what are the 5 things that you hope every learner would be able to do. So inevitably, that content question is going to relate directly to this second question that you've asked us. So if you'll give us some permission as a subcommittee to discuss this a little bit further, I think that we can come back to you with some good ideas around that.
That's terrific. And like I say, the recommendations you made previously have been super valuable to us in this process. So it's greatly appreciated.
Wonderful.
Jennifer, can you have a line of sight down the road on what things this group can help you support going forward? Do you have some things in mind?
So right now, that's the main, the performance learning objectives, nailing those down. Nicole, I like how you said that. If there are five things that someone who completed this credential, what they should know how to do. I think that's perfect.
Jennifer, have you interacted at all with the Sustainable Leadership Purchasing Council? Did I?
SPLC.
Yeah, Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council. I don't know if they're a resource, but it just seems like since they're focused on sustainability and purchasing.
And they call themselves purchasing, but it's really procurement. They're looking at the full process.
Might be a good resource just to get some feedback on this whole area of certification.
Thank you. Are they a particular agency?
They're an NGO.
No, they're a nonprofit, right? Are they a
Yeah.
nonprofit?
They're an
Oh,
NGO. Yeah.
Let
And
me put the link in the chat.
okay.
it could
Terrific.
be, I suspect that GSA is a member, so you would have access to all of their resources already. You just need to create individual access for yourself to see what's there, and you can pose questions up there and connect with other individuals. But they have a summit every August where everyone comes together and starts sharing their best practices, and this might be a nice place also to engage. I have a question somewhat related to Mark's, and that's, how are you hoping to roll this out? So the expectation is it's going to take a year or so to develop the credential. And then what? What's on the horizon?
Yeah, so then the credential would be added to that 40, that number that I told you about. There are about 40 credentials that are available to the civilian workforce. Adding it to that group is an advertisement in and of itself, because that's what's on the FAI site, where everyone sort of shopping for a credential is going to go there. But other than that, I think we're going to start with GSA. It's going to be a GSA effort to promote the credential and get as many GSA acquisition workforce members to work toward the credential as possible. And then we'll be able to collect some feedback from them, and then it becomes a little easier to make it government-wide.
Yep. I think it's a phrase that Kristen has used many times: crawl, walk, run. And you have to start by crawling, and at the end of it all, you're going to be running, and it'll become, agency wide. Do you have a sense then of what the time commitments are? So how are you scoping this out?
Yeah, so all of the credentials are between 20 and 80 hours of work. I think typically they average at about 50 hours. Yeah.
And is the expectation going to be that there's going to be an applied project associated with it, with some experiential learning, or is this your straight up online training?
I don't know yet, but I love that idea. I love the idea of someone working on a particular project to apply, because it goes back to that application piece that we want, right? Yeah.
If I could on that, so definitely how learning application is part of every credential, but again, if you can think about them in terms of groupings, but if you get this credential and you start to stack them, then is there a higher level kind of project associated with that or demonstrable submission, as you look at that? And because what can happen is you can start to build a lot of momentum around this, and then you can create communities of people with credentials. It just can be a lot of fun once you get started. So, and to Ann's point, 3 to 5, like if we could identify 3 to 5 critical procurement positions in that greater context, whoever put that in the chat, I love that, the
Mhm.
whole team. And then 3 key credentials that could be developed around each of those positions and how they kind of see the big puzzle, how they all fit together. And then just start building them one by one and promoting them, and you start to fill in the blanks.
Well, that's a really good point, and I meant to ask that, but I forgot. Can you propose to start this within GSA first? I may be saying what you all just said.
So what I'll say is that a requesting agency, that process that I described with the governance board, the FAI governance board for credentials, when they have an agency come to them with an idea for a credential, that agency is taking a lot of responsibility for it. So I see it that way anyway. I think we're not kidding ourselves. We're gonna be using our SMEs, and we're gonna be rolling it out here in GSA before it goes. That being said, we think of it as government.
Sense.
Absolutely, because it's just we gain feedback a lot easier that way. I think we frame it as government wide, just in that we don't want a duplication of efforts. We
Fair
put
enough.
it through the governance board there just to ensure that there's not another group somewhere forming a sustainability credential.
I like the idea of starting sort of focused, and you can apply it to the teams in GSA, and they can go deep, and you have that practical application to see how it's working. And then I would just sort of build it with the spirit of it's iterative. You're gonna be, however you roll it out on day 1, it will look very different on day every week. And that's what you want. You want to get feedback and modify and feedback and modify and stay, because it is such a rapidly changing space too, that you want to stay current and agile and iterative. And let me see how many more tech words I can throw out, but it is a nice approach to this space in particular.
I like that.
I'll just share this as an example. I'll go back to my lean days at the Postal Service. So you can imagine trying to drive this across this huge organization. And one of the leaders said, my vision is I want every level of the organization to be a problem solver. And so we actually took like an org chart, started with like letter carriers, and put 3 blank lines. So like if what would be the 3 things that the letter carrier could do to be a problem solver, a supervisor, a manager? As you move up in the ranks, it's a lot about resourcing and setting expectations and providing time for folks. But, and I think if you could take a microcosm of the procurement world, workforce, and just do that exercise from a sustainability lens, it can be pretty powerful. And it's a good thing to have like the people to actually engage on, also hear from those levels, like we did with the focus group, Nicole. If there was 3 things, what would they be that would help us move this forward from your job perspective? And they'll tell you.
And I wonder, I think, I don't know if we're talking about the same focus group, Kristen, but these were individuals who were steeped in sustainability, they were the contract managers, I think, that we spoke with, that panel of contract managers. They had a lot to say about the skill sets that they were really sort of reaching towards, but were having to acquire on their own through third-party means, was essentially what was happening. Jennifer, what additional questions do you have for us?
Let me just take a quick look. I had a list of questions. So do you guys know of any learning assets courses that exist currently that you would recommend would be included in the curriculum? Or do you know of anyone who creates sustainability course content?
There's so many organizations that do it. That's sort of a tricky place to function. It's in part why in our last set of recommendations, we suggested that GSA put out a request for information about third parties that are delivering sustainability curriculum so that the agency can get a better sense of what that landscape looks like, because it's vast. It's really big, and there are individuals, there are organizations targeting in very different ways around this, right? And you might decide that some of those targeted areas are going to be really important, but not nearly comprehensive enough as you think about what this would look like. But I think in developing that recognition, this subcommittee felt like we were even struggling to put our hands around what the landscape looked like. So I would suggest that one follow-up, that recommendation, figuring out where that is in space and time could potentially really help you in thinking this through.
That is usually part of our process, is we do what's called an environmental scan, where we look at all the coursework that exists, just to make sure we're not creating something that already exists. Yeah.
I think that, and maybe it's one and the same, these were third-party credentials of sorts, right? So it may be that you learn along the way that for those people who need the deep dive in green buildings, LEED certification is probably the best game in town, and that's what they should get. And there's no reason to reinvent that wheel, but you may learn that there are deficits in other areas too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for that.
Or does it look like you wanted to jump in?
No, I was just going to bring David in because that's an area where he's done. So I'm kind of pinpointing David. I don't know if you have some thoughts, David, to share on that.
You mean me?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about another David. Thoughts on, sorry about that. Thoughts on what, Boris, exactly?
Yeah, on the training that you have been working on, the different.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the biggest things for me, and I thought we were going to have another section of the meeting to talk about this, Nicole, when you went down that path, but bringing in the economics and having people that can walk stakeholders through the sort of the math of sustainability, how it's going to affect things from an economic standpoint. That's a skill set we don't talk about very often for procurement people, but they're going to need to be able to have that ability to share that information with stakeholders. So we don't talk about that much from a procurement standpoint. It is definitely a core competency that I believe in for our space. And so whether you call it financial analysis or economic analysis, tying it to the sustainability effort is going to be pretty important.
David, do you envision this as different from life cycle cost assessment or life cycle costing?
A little bit, because with life cycle costing, you're considering a whole lot of things beyond just the sustainability aspect, and it may get lost in the mix there. Targeting sustainability and the economic impacts of that is probably pretty paramount for the people that are non-believers. The reality is that not everybody has that strong feeling about sustainability that we do. And so there's a little bit of sales that has to go on, usually through the procurement people as they're dealing with their stakeholders. So having that economic piece as a part of their toolkit where they can sort of explain here are the ramifications of not doing it, here are the benefits financially of doing it. Those kind of conversations are pretty heavy, are pretty important for these folks to be able to have.
I agree. I agree. I also think of that as part of the business case for doing this.
Yeah, you're gonna do the life cycle stuff, that's important as well, but there's so many elements of life cycle costing that, again, don't want to lose the focus on, but here's this track called sustainability, and here's the math and how it all works in support of what we're doing from a procurement standpoint.
That's the numbers behind the business case.
Exactly. Not
Stephanie,
necessarily a skill set that all my procurement friends have, but certainly something we need to embed as a part of this discussion.
yeah. Stephanie.
Yes, I just had a quick comment, and when it's time for public comments as well, I would love to, Cindy put something really meaningful in the chat. And if she's on afterwards, I definitely would like to hear from her as well. But in listening to everyone, Nicole, you mentioned 5 elements, and acquisition has a life cycle that encompasses 5 elements. Acquisition planning, the sourcing and the procurement, the closing. So if you looked at it from the acquisition's life cycle standpoint, addressed sustainability in a very foundational and broad aspect of sustainability, everyone could get something, right? And then from there, you build on top of that for the specialized training. I think Cindy mentioned in her chat, she says, let's not reinvent the wheel. I'm just gonna put that out there. But just like David just mentioned, and these are some things I just wrote down, just in the pre-acquisition planning, how to conduct a sustainability assessment, setting the criteria for sustainability and engaging the stakeholders in sustainability. That could just be a foundational that everyone can learn, everyone can get. And then as they finish those different trainings, then they can do their specialized training for their specific disciplines and build from there. I think that could be a way of starting a process, just in listening, just a suggestion.
I can also imagine that when you talk about, say, how to conduct a sustainability assessment, you draw examples from each of these different areas so that individuals can anchor it within their area of specialization without having to directly target that area of specialization. It just becomes the examples that are peppered through.
I've been trying to put something in chat for 20 minutes on just what you said, Stephanie. I can't get it to work, but we're thinking along the same lines. It's just a life cycle of a sourcing strategy, and it's a sustainable sourcing strategy and just a visual of understand the business need and make the case for sustainable options, develop category strategies that incorporate sustainability opportunities, identify potential suppliers that could meet it, etc. So I'll send it via email.
And B touched on this earlier when she started talking about total cost of ownership, but there is a place where you can certainly, if you're already having discussions and training that incorporate total cost of ownership, there's another place where you can kind of incorporate the sustainability piece because it is an element of TCO.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer, I'm going to bring it back to you. Did you have other questions for us?
No, this has been a very helpful conversation. I really appreciate all of you putting your minds together on this.
That's great. I think we have some homework as we think about this a little bit more to engage and provide you some additional feedback. You were asking about recently changed regulations, and I'm just putting some stuff in the chat here that you can glean from additional items for you to look at. But otherwise, let me bring it back to the subcommittee and ask whether there are additional questions for Jennifer, for B, about how they're rolling forward sustainability education within GSA.
Hey, Nicole, if I can jump in briefly, I feel, and this is not so much of a question, it's more of a comment. I see a benefit of this credentialing program tying into our industry partnerships discussions, because what I'm thinking about is when we define and we start explaining, here's what the credentialing program, this is something we want to communicate then to our industry partners. So this is how we're going to be looking at your offerings, regardless of where you're coming in, so that it will help our industry partners really begin to think about what we're going to be looking for on the government side. So just more of a comment, not so much of a question. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Other feedback before we move on to a Jamboard session? This has been tremendously, I think, informative and useful and encouraging to see how this conversation is moving forward. David, you came off mute. Why don't you jump on in?
Yeah, I was gonna just say, Jennifer, I'm not sure how the program ultimately pans out, but I always am interested in what people leave with. It's one thing to sit in a classroom and get credentials and end up with the certificates. It's another thing to walk out the door prepared to be a beacon of knowledge and to, engage in some level of discipleship around this. So I'm hopeful that whatever as a conclusion to the training, that they're left with some tools or something they can use to tell the story. I talked about this before. Nicole probably got sick of me saying it, but I've learned over the course of the years that it's pretty important on the procurement side for us to be able to tell that story, whether it's the economic impact or the social impacts or whatever that is. So hopefully, as you're thinking about your curriculum, your credentialing, they leave with something, some tools that help them do that.
I appreciate that, David. Thank you.
And I get the sense that you're definitely forecasting in that direction. I mean, one of the questions that you had for us that I popped into the chat was, what performance learning objectives should this credential include? So you're definitely asking yourself what those skills should be, but it hasn't been quite determined as yet. You're still at the earlier stages with that.
Exactly.
In our last round of recommendations, we provided information. There were two education, boy, it was only just a few months ago, subcommittee members, but I admit it's a bit foggy at this stage of the game. We discussed what experiential learning should look like. Experiential learning for the most maximum input or most maximum learning outcomes, like what's going to resonate most with the learner. And then we had another recommendation in there directed towards education. And do you happen to remember what that was? I am struggling to remember. Or no, I don't think we did. I think that was the request for information about third-party certification.
I think you're right.
Yeah, those were the two. So we do have advice out there about the experiential learning for sure. But when it comes to these learning objectives, this is a place where we haven't wrestled with as much to date.
It's the work ahead of us for all of us, I think.
I know. When you said it took about a year, I think you said about a year, it did make sense to me. It's a lot of, you have to be super thoughtful, and so, yeah.
Nicole, B had her hand up.
I missed that. Jump on in, B.
Oh, I was just going to say, if that RFI, if it was not in the other recommendation, if that could be captured somewhere, because that is definitely something we need to do in terms of sourcing. As you know, across the civilian sector and the commercial side, there's so many sustainability credential programs. I mean, the sky's the limit, but being able to hone that in, to mine that data and bring that into to a government contracting space, I think that's what we need to do. And I think a recommendation as such might help us to have the capacity to do that even better.
So that recommendation was advanced. We presented it in, that would have been December. Is that right, Boris?
That
But
is correct. Mhm. Yeah,
think-
and yeah, the report was just published.
Yes.
I'll go back
I
and
believe
look
it
at
was-
that. I'll
yeah.
go back and pull that out because I need to get that to the right person to
Mhm.
execute on that. I remember the report that I saw before, but I think what I saw was a draft version or something like that,
Yeah.
Boris, from doing Joe's talking points. So I'll go back and look at that because that's definitely something that we
Yeah.
we need to do on the inside of the agency to be able to empower Jen's team with that data.
Yep. And I would say, Jen, that recommendation on the experiential learning can help you think about what a final project might look like.
Yeah, right.
Okay, we're a little bit ahead of time. That is absolutely okay. I wanted to provide the subcommittee another opportunity to jump in if there are any parting words or final thoughts or itching questions that you would like to ask Bea and Jennifer while they're here.
No, thank you for joining.
Yeah, this was really, really helpful. And I think it's helped us as a subcommittee think about how we might anchor our time in one of the recommendations that is going to move forward. So thank you. At this point, I'd like to pivot and move to our Jamboard to capture some of our ideas that this conversation has certainly invoked. I'm going to cut and paste this into our chat.
Hey, Nicole,
I just wanted
just a
to
word.
mention, to Jennifer and B that the chat, we will capture those and I'll make sure that you get those comments, okay?
Thank
All
you.
right.
I was
Okay.
trying to copy. I was trying to copy and paste, and I couldn't. do it.
It won't
No,
let
So thank
you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're
But
welcome.
I dropped the link to the report in the chat as well. So it's live on our website. So back to you, Nicole.
That's great. So in the chat, there's a link. So you can't click on links. So when Boris says he linked you to the report, you can click on that and get there. To the subcommittee, go ahead and click on our Jamboard link. And this is an opportunity for us to begin brainstorming about what we just heard here and what next steps might look like. If there are particular areas within those next steps that we think are going to be essential. So David, you mentioned the economics behind some of behind the business case. I encourage you to pop that in here. Anything else as we think about moving forward a recommendation around what this credential, the contents of the credential would look like? And thank you, Boris. Boris has shared this so that the public can also see what's going on, but jump on into the Jamboard itself and let's just take it's like the Jamboard moment of silence where we're still all here, but we're just working individually to pull stuff in. Oh, Anne, nice one. Nice.
Not a shame,
that.
hand rung on a Friday afternoon. Oh my
Woo.
I
goodness.
challenge anyone to top this.
Yeah,
record.
yeah. I'm just gonna drink my blue bottle. It's water.
I meet your graphic and I raise it with this.
Where did this come from? Do we have a source?
I was watching a training video online from a woman in Britain. And so she was a former government procurement expert in sustainability, but
Oh,
it was from her PowerPoint.
Okay.
I mean, I created it.
Just now. Just now.
so I'm gonna drop off if you guys.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, I should have said you're absolutely welcome to stay, but your time is valuable. We get that too. So if you need to cast off, please feel free. And thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. It's
Thank
been great
you.
talking with you. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bea and Jennifer.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you. Bye-bye.
appreciate it. Bye.
Bye, B.
Seem to grab a sticky. This is weird. Hmm. Oh, I'm in the wrong mode. Sorry.
Nicole,
Yep.
I have a question. Would you have any issue with us sharing this Jamboard with her focus group? Just as a view, not as a, so they can't add any input?
No, I have no concern whatsoever, Stephanie. It's a public meeting, so this
Mhm.
is the public space. Yeah,
Okay, all right.
And I think they should feel free to add to it if they want to as well.
that'd be great.
Okay.
And this image that you got, is it linked to a website or is it linked to a slide? I'm trying to my darndest to copy it.
Oh, to see
and
it.
paste it into, into like a Google Doc so I can really blow it up, and I'm not able to do it. For
Oh,
some,
I think I have a link to it. Let's see.
yeah, if you could pop the link in the chat, that'd be great.
Well, for some reason it's acting weird. Yeah, let me see here.
Actually, the other thing I can do is give you access to the speaker note or the speaker questions doc.
Mhm.
It's shareable to all of us, and you can put it in there.
Sure. Yeah, I'm gonna just put myself on mute and I will just look at YouTube and find it.
All right. Well, you copied it, right, from somewhere?
Yeah, it was a PowerPoint presentation that she was giving via YouTube
If it was,
training.
if whatever that source is that you copied, if you could just put it in the linked document, then I'll be able to pull it from there. So I just put a link in the chat. So for some reason, Jamboard has weird restrictions on what you can copy and paste. That's the issue. I'm not able to copy the image for some
Yeah, I
reason.
have to find the source.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry.
Yeah, no worries. It'll take 2 seconds.
I'm still impressed she got that graphic in there because I haven't been able to do that. She's a technology wizard.
It was more impressive if I could get it on a sticky note, but
Just take a couple more minutes. I'm still going back through my notes to see what else is here. Right, we're slowing down a little bit. I'd like to get a sense from the committee. I mean, we have high level ideas here. Oh, Anne has her. It's the YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I don't
There's
wanna play
actually
that.
tons of trainings on sustainability and procurement. So
And the image is embedded in here, is that it?
it's one of her slides. But the link may be actually in the YouTube video as well. I don't know if you can access this. Let me see.
Oh, it's an hour. I'll figure out.
Oh,
where
you
to-
can just forward to that. You'll see that slide.
Let me see.
Yeah, it's at
Oh, I found it.
Oh, good.
37 at 37:18 it pops up. There it is.
what I did with my Thursday evening.
And this is why we work so well together. Fantastic. Yep, I am copying this and I'm going to pop it into our speaker questions for today's session so that we all have access to this. And it's in there. And I can blow this up so we can see it a little bit better. Beautiful, thank you. And I guess I'm asking myself, I'd like to take some time as a group. I know that there are certain things that we can do with what's here based on the expertise that we have. I am a little bit more curious about the direct content questions of those top 5 things. What would they be? And so I am going to slide over to the next Jamboard and put in a header. For ourselves, and I'd like to spend a little bit of time on asking ourselves, what are the top 5 items top of mind, recognizing we're going to go back and we're going to look at this a little bit more systematically, but I'd just like to get some of your ideas down here. So we're on slide number 9 of the Jamboard. What should be here in the credential?
Nicole, do you mean in terms of learning objectives or skills?
Yes.
Or
No, 100%. We should look at start at the learning objectives and then you walk backwards.
yeah, learning objectives. Yeah.
So I'm sorry, can you clarify that? So is it for a specific credential or are these kind of general objectives for a credential?
For a credential that would apply regardless of where you're functioning within the acquisition life cycle.
I mean,
Still not following.
kind of like drawing from that graphic. I just, because it's general enough, like everyone should be able to, I should shut up. I should just put the,
No,
I mean,
no.
it's the graphic for me, but
Well, it's kind of like, I see it as stacking, like there's a general knowledge credential that could be anywhere. But, and then you have like these other credentials. So are you talking about the general knowledge credential, Nicole?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that helps. So what if we were to break the atom apart, and now I'm getting all punchy on Friday afternoon. If you're gonna break the atom apart, the nuclei and the stuff inside of the credential, the general learning credential.
Yeah.
yeah. So regardless of whether you're a program manager in vehicles or a contracting officer in the buildings team, what are the 5 objectives that you want each person to achieve, right? Regardless.
From that foundational kind of credential, the foundational credential.
Yeah. And I just kind of back to Stephanie's point, like I feel like it could follow along the life cycle of an acquisition. It's like, regardless of whether you're a program manager in vehicles or a contracting officer, you have to be able to make a business case for,
Which is item number 1 in that image.
yeah, for
here.
sustainable options, like how you're going to, because it may not be met uniformly across, may not be embraced by other stakeholders.
So I'm brainstorming, spitballing in real time here. Maybe the approach is to take a little bit more look at the 7 different items that are here and ask, is there anything else here that we're missing? Based on your own expertise and what you know about this. So number 1 is to understand the business need and make a case for sustainable options. Number 2, develop category strategies that incorporate sustainability opportunities. Is this something that regardless of where you are in the acquisition lifecycle, you should know how to do this?
Yeah, and I almost think of it as like develop sort of a green sourcing, a sustainability sourcing plan. Yeah, I think like even if you're,
But do you think that, so think about it in terms of a nugget of a 50-hour, is it
yeah.
the actual creating of it, or is it the understanding the key elements of each of these things and what it would look like from a sustainability perspective?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think about
Good
it
question,
like,
yeah.
math,
Mhm.
like, you have to get those fundamentals, right? So for that foundational level credential.
I like that. I think you're right. Yeah, right. Because not everyone has to write it, but you should know what goes in it.
Yeah, so it's more about that general knowledge, right? Of,
Mhm.
do you understand, generally foundations are about terminology, and then it could be a little more specific along this life cycle. Like,
Mhm.
think about the credential could almost be like a golden thread. This is how it's weaved throughout the procurement life cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think there has to be a component, because this is government, of just understanding some of the fundamental statutory regulatory requirements, just kind of get grounded in that piece.
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Now, was
fast and
some of
it's
that in
wide.
that basic, remember that training we took?
Well, that was climate.
So that was
building.
just, but that didn't have any of the procurement regulation in it. I can't remember, but
It
I,
had links to some of those.
right, but to your
I
point, if
think
it doesn't go deeper, yeah, that's part of the why too, right?
It's part
Yeah.
of the business need, I think, because
Mhm.
there are certain regulatory expectations around.
Yeah, that's true. Mhm.
So if you think about the business case and how it would flow across, it's almost like what everybody needs to know. And then as you move across this life cycle, what is the very first tier of knowledge or competency you would want to see?
I feel like knowing what the key kind of components of strong sustainability requirements are. Like, this piece of the acquisition life cycle is supposed to be collaborative between program managers and 1102s, like regardless of your role, even project managers. And you collaborate to develop those requirements. That's the core of this entire effort.
I love that as a
Say that
credential.
You don't
first
have it.
Collaborating for
time.
sustainable procurement, collaborating for, I love that. Almost exemplifying that, right?
I was thinking around building requirements. Yeah.
But say that first part one more time. What you said something.
It was really around the development of sustainable requirements, and how does one think about those and articulate those, or identify them and articulate them and surface them. And I was making the point, like, regardless of whether you're program manager, project manager, or 1102, this is really foundational, because all of you are supposed to be collaborating on the writing of requirements.
Is it integrating sustainability into the requirements, the concept
Yes.
that you're
Yeah.
getting to?
Yeah.
Yes.
Embedding sustainability into the collaborative
Yeah.
process.
Mhm.
Yep.
That could almost be a credential. I love that because different
Mhm.
people going out and then part of the demonstrable, right?
Mhm.
Can be, it doesn't have to be project, it can be real life example of how you've done this. Like,
Mhm. Yeah. In a solicitation, yeah.
yep, and demonstrate that, right? And then part of that is somebody can assess that and certify that credential. I would see that in like the piloting of it, right?
Mhm.
Making sure we. I think that's pretty deep. Integrating sustainability in the collaborative requirements building process within this life, right? And then you identify like those people that are supposed to be collaborating and what that looks like.
David, you dropped something in the chat. Why don't you go and describe what we're looking at? Aha. Okay. Another nice image.
I love visuals.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, I was talking and I wasn't on, I was on mute.
Oh, no.
I'm really having a struggle today. But this is the ISM sustainability competency model that they're going with. They're talking about 11 competencies and 38 sub-competencies. So you can see it gets into areas like DE&I and social responsibility as well, but they're focused on sort of the overall sustainability piece. So I don't know if this adds value or not. Their approach is to kind of set different training goals depending on if you want folks to master it, be operate at an advanced level, or just be kind of foundational. But anyway, I thought I'd throw it in there just if it gives us any ideas.
I think it
That's
does.
fantastic.
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
love it.
It gets back to this notion of stacking, right?
Right.
Like
exactly.
maturity model, Stephanie.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
It always
Exactly.
comes back to this maturity model.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
But if
Yeah,
you
this
look
is
at,
great,
if you look
David.
at what David has provided,
Mhm.
you could have a course on ethics and sustainability.
Yes, you
Right.
could.
Have
You
a
could.
course, and these are just some basic foundational courses. You could have a
Yes.
course in supply chain. I mean,
Yes. Yes. Managing, identifying suppliers and how to work with them and how to evaluate them. It's a whole area.
Well, and sometimes like the stacking of these credentialing is what can lead you to this badging of your foundational certified, your proficient certified, your advanced.
Right. Right.
I don't know how to, did I put that in there? I didn't
What?
mean to
The
put.
graphic, I think Nicole.
I put it
pasted
in. Is that all
Oh,
right,
okay.
David?
She took
Like,
it to the
did
next
I-
level, David.
Did I actually figure that out? I was thinking I put that. Let's see
You
if I win it.
totally figured it out, David.
Girl, look at that.
For what it's worth.
It's awesome.
Okay, I think we have a lot here to assemble. And I'll take the lead on doing that offline and thinking about how this is going to look, and I'll bring it back to the next administrative meeting. Is there anything else that members of the subcommittee want to address related to the Jamboard discussions and what we've heard about and been thinking about and conversing about today? It's a really rich
Good
conversation.
discussion.
That was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So at this time, I'd like to just pause and open it up to the public and ask if there are any comments or thoughts that you would like to provide to the subcommittee. I don't know that we have any members left.
None left.
We're all
Okay,
holding on by a thread here, Nicole.
okay.
So Nicole, I do have one item of admin. We
Yes.
haven't set a date for our admin meeting next week, so I wanted to
Oh,
put
Mark
that
has
out there.
his hand up, too.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to decide now, but just to say we need to find a time and because it would have been Monday, so that's just next Monday. We could do it Monday if you would like, but that's coming pretty soon to
All
give
right,
you all maybe a chance to.
I just assumed all the dates were already on there.
All right.
So I didn't know that there wasn't a date on the calendar.
Yeah, not for this one because of we moved, our meeting was supposed to be this Monday, and we moved it to Friday, so
Yeah.
just wanted to.
Can you give us a status update on what's happening with John Gill?
So we did find, he did point us to a couple of people at OPM. So he's no longer involved in the
Oh,
effort to
Okay.
come up with performance plans on SES, performance plans and sustainability. But he gave us a couple of POCs. I reached out to them. I haven't heard back from them.
okay.
So that's where we stand. But I think Stephanie had a point here, and then Mark. Yeah.
Mark also does.
It was Mark first.
Okay, Mark.
Okay, I think, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure can.
Okay, good. So one of the things I participated in is a fleet electrification monthly meeting. And what happens there are a multiple amount of states come together and say, these are our initiatives, these are our accomplishments, these are the things we want to share. I know this is a federal organization, but you can learn from the states as well. My suggestion might be, as part of the training, that ongoing thing is to learn from other people doing different things. The states could be that resource.
Do you have contacts, Mark, in particular?
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that.
I think that's a great idea, Mark. Basically benchmarking for best practices. So
Thank you, David.
I think we are totally open to that. The question becomes who. So if you know of someone in particular who's on the frontier within this space, we would love to bring them in. That would be terrific.
I'll send that.
I'm going to ask you to jump in a little bit more and make the contact, if that's all right, because if you've been engaging with these folks, if you can just set up that introductory email, that'd be really super.
Happy to do it, Nicole.
Great, thank you.
Stephanie.
Yes, I just wanted to read a comment that Cindy left in the chat because she was a public attendee. And she said so much training already exists across the government on each of the fundamental concepts and principles for sustainable acquisition that Ann referenced. Also, GSA itself has gathered so much information on sustainability on its SF tool that could be and should be utilized for developing a credential. And she says, please don't reinvent the wheel, build on what we already have. So I think that's worth mentioning for the public that can't see that comment.
I totally agree. And we'll see if I can do this. This is a real test, y'all. I have copied this and saved it to the clipboard. And let me see if I can drop it in our Jamboard.
But agree 100% with
It's
Cindy.
here. It's in our Jamboard now.
Yep. I think part of the challenge is just understanding where everything is and what's available and how do you pull it together. I think that's been one of the benefits of this whole gap back exploration is you realize there's so much already going on, but can we connect it so that we get greater impact?
I mean, that in part is what fueled the recommendation we had last go around to have a request for information, because so many people were asking, well, what's already out there? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. And there are a lot of trainings out there that have a ton of street cred. So why in the world would we step back and say, well, let's do something better, when actually what's out there is pretty good already? So really surveying that landscape, I think, is going to be important. So, okay, I've captured her note in the Jamboard here. So Boris, back to your original question about the next administrative meeting. I think this is a really good point, and I want to open it up in part because I am super conscious of the fact that we have a limited number of meetings between now and May. And so it may be that we not meet next Monday, but we ask if there's another administrative meeting day that we can host between now and our next public meeting, because we're going to be losing one along the way. And it does make me anxious when those are key check-in points for us to assemble information, get feedback from you about next steps. So I'm taking a look at my calendar. Let me get in the right space. And if we don't meet next week, would March 4th work for the subcommittee? So we push it back by 1 week.
Yep, that works for me, so.
Yeah, I don't want to hold up the subcommittee though. You guys go. I'm gonna be on vacation that week. Go. Out your way, Nicole, heading to the Grand Canyon.
Ooh, it's officially a spring break out here, but that means nothing for faculty. Zero.
So that works for me, Nicole. I can
Were you
start with that.
thinking 12 to 1? I have a 12:30.
I mean, we could do it slightly earlier if that works, but I can also, let me take a look.
I can do the first 30 minutes.
And Boris, not to usurp the AWS's time, but can you also let me know, like, what do we have on the calendar for IPS for admin? I may need to change that as well.
Yeah, the IPS one, actually, we haven't firmed that one up either. And so we
Okay.
we could do it next Tuesday.
Mm.
But I'll defer to you, Kristen, when that's gonna work best for you. So,
And
Let me,
And
Oh,
Chris-
actually, that works fine, March 4th, Monday.
oh, beautiful.
so I'll wait to hear from you, Kristen, on the IPS.
And Kristen, can you hang back once we adjourn, just for a minute?
David and Mark, how do
4:50 on a Friday. Stephanie, anything for you?
how does
And
March
March
4th?
4th works for me too.
David, are you
Yeah,
good?
it's fine. I put it in the chat. It's fine for me.
Okay.
Beautiful. Okay,
So
we got,
again, the time would be, make sure I have it Eastern time. What would be the time? 3
p.m. to 4
3
p.m.
or 4
yep.
on it. Okay, 3 to 4, got it.
And are all the other meetings on our calendar now, Boris?
The public ones are, the other ones, yes, they are. Yeah, to
Okay.
answer your
They
question, yeah. Yeah, we put those in. Yes, I remember doing that. Yes, those are already on the calendar.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Kristen, you're on mute.
I said the public and the chairs. It's really just Saratoga water. I just want you to know. The public and the chairs are on the calendar.
The chairs, yes. Mhm.
Okay,
And,
just what's not is the admin.
The admin, correct.
Right.
But
But
we got,
except for ours.
yeah, we got theirs. Yeah, we gotta put yours down. Yeah.
Okay, delinquent.
Nathan, you're doing a brilliant job over there. I've been watching you. You're incredibly animated. It's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan. I was looking when Nicole said street cred, like how that was interpreted.
I just had a question. Who said something about the Grand Canyon? Is there a thing?
Kristen's going to.
I hope there is, because that's where I'm going.
All right.
Okay, if
Well,
you're
let-
out there
let-
the first week of April, I'll be there too.
Okay.
Let me do this. Let's go ahead and adjourn the meeting. And